Part 1. The secret war between the mind that wants and the soul that already has. There comes a moment on the spiritual path that feels like a cruel contradiction. You've read the books, spoken the affirmations, visualized with precision, and held the vibration as best as you could. But the thing you asked for, the healing, the partner, the abundance, the clarity, remains just out of reach. It's like brushing fingers with a reality that refuses to fully land in your experience. And the more effort you apply, the more resistance you seem to generate. That's because what you're dealing with isn't about effort. It's about structure. And the structure that's resisting your quantum manifestation is your ego. We're taught to believe the ego is just arrogance or pride, but that's a shallow definition. The ego is much more clever than that. It's the part of you that was built for survival, not expansion. It's the identity you constructed to be safe in a world that told you who to be. And although it served a purpose, it does not belong in the driver's seat of your quantum life. Because the ego cannot access the quantum field. Not because it's unworthy, but because it's linear. It sees time as past, present, future. It sees self as separate, small, and defined. And quantum manifestation requires you to collapse all those illusions at once. The ego wants to manifest by controlling outcomes. It wants to orchestrate the how, the when, the why, and the path. But the field doesn't work that way. The field responds to state, not strategy. It mirrors your frequency, not your effort. And this is where the conflict begins, because your soul is already there, but your ego cannot let go. Your soul already knows you're worthy, already feels the timeline where it's done, already remembers the version of you that's living it. But the ego needs proof. It needs logic. It needs steps. And by needing those things, it becomes the gatekeeper that delays the very miracle it's begging for.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Have you ever noticed how hard it is to surrender? Not just conceptually, but in the bones, in the breath, in the nervous system? That's your ego clinging to control. Because to the ego, surrender feels like death. It was built to prevent uncertainty. And yet, quantum manifestation requires you to live in that very uncertainty with absolute trust. Can you feel the tension there? The ego says, show me, and I'll believe. The quantum says, believe, and I'll show you. And so we stay stuck in the gap, not because the manifestation isn't ready, but because we aren't. What if I told you that the universe doesn't respond to what you ask for, but to who you are while asking? That it's not about the desire itself, but the identity from which it's broadcasted. The question then becomes, who's doing the asking, your soul or your ego? Your soul asks through embodiment, through alignment, through vibration. Your ego asks through urgency, lack, and performance. And the field can feel the difference. That's why some manifestations come effortlessly and others feel impossible. It's not just about what you want. It's about who is wanting. We were never meant to manifest from the mind alone. The mind is a beautiful tool, but it's not the engine of creation. Creation begins in the heart, in the field, in the frequency you hold when no one is watching. And the ego cannot access that space unless it is dethroned. Not killed, not shamed, but gently removed from the throne it was never meant to occupy. That's the real spiritual work, not to destroy the ego, but to reassign it, to let the soul lead, while the ego learns to serve rather than sabotage. If you've ever felt like manifestation is easy for others but hard for you, the reason may be simpler than you think. It's not because they're more spiritual. It's not because they're lucky. It's because they've learned to get out of their own way. They've learned to embody the version of themselves that already has the thing they desire before it arrives. They don't need to prove or push or panic. They rest in the frequency of done, and that frequency bends time. But the ego doesn't like that approach. It wants to earn it. It wants to deserve it. It wants a checklist, a technique, a process it can master. That's why the ego loves spiritual hustle. It gives the illusion of progress while secretly reinforcing lack. So you burn sage, repeat mantras, visualize until your third eye aches. But if it's all coming from a place of "I don't have it yet," you're broadcasting absence, not presence. And the field listens to vibration, not vocabulary. This is why the most powerful manifestation technique is not a technique at all, it's identity. It's embodied state. When you become the version of you that already has it, you collapse the timeline between you and the reality. But becoming that version requires the death of the version you've been clinging to. And that's where the ego protests. It says, "But who will I be without the struggle? Who will I be if I no longer need to fix, prove, or chase?" That fear of freedom is why so many of us unconsciously push away ease. Because ease threatens the identity built on effort. So let me ask you a question that might shake something loose. What part of you is still addicted to the struggle? What part of you believes that things must be hard to be real? What part of you equates suffering with depth or resistance with worthiness? Because until we face that part, we'll keep manifesting resistance, even if we say all the right words. Quantum manifestation doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your truth. And the truth is often buried under layers of egoic programming. You can't fake frequency. You can't trick the field. You can't pretend to be abundant while secretly vibrating with fear. And you don't have to. The field doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be real, to feel the fear and show up anyway, to hold the vision, not from desperation, but from devotion. Because devotion is rooted in the soul. Desperation is rooted in the ego. And those two vibrations create entirely different realities. When we finally understand that the ego isn't bad, it's just scared we begin to love it back into its proper place. We stop trying to manifest with force and start aligning with flow. We stop begging the universe for scraps and start opening to the infinite. We stop chasing and start receiving. But receiving requires trust, and trust is the one thing the ego cannot do. That's why it must be retrained, not punished, but reparented. This is the sacred dance the soul leads, the ego follows. The soul dreams, the ego executes. The soul aligns, the ego organizes. But if the ego leads, we build sandcastle structures that look solid but collapse under pressure. That's why so many of our manifestations fall apart, even when they arrive. They were built on a foundation of fear. Not because we're weak, but because we didn't know better. But now we do. Part 2. The illusion of control and the quantum law of surrender. The greatest illusion the ego ever sold us was the belief that control equals safety. That the more we monitor, micromanage, and manipulate the outcomes of our life, the more secure we become. But in quantum reality, control is the opposite of power. The more we grip, the more we push away. The more we demand answers, the more the field withholds them, not out of cruelty, but because the frequency of control is a frequency of resistance. And resistance always creates delay. The universe doesn't respond to desperation disguised as discipline. It responds to energetic openness. And that openness can only exist when the ego relinquishes control. Control is the ego's last defense against the unknown. The unknown is terrifying to a mind that survives by categorizing, predicting, and protecting. But in the quantum world, the unknown is sacred. It's where all possibilities live. It's where timelines bend and miracles are born. And this is the paradox. The very thing we fear, uncertainty, is the only space where the impossible becomes possible. So how do we surrender to the unknown when every part of us is trained to fear it? It begins with unlearning the lie that surrender is weakness. Surrender is not passivity. It's not giving up. It's not spiritual laziness. Surrender is an act of radical alignment. It says, I trust the intelligence that designed galaxies to also orchestrate my becoming. It's not a lack of action, it's inspired action that arises from resonance, not reaction. When you're in true surrender, you don't stop moving, you just stop forcing. You stop trying to push a square peg through a round spiritual hole. You stop demanding the universe deliver your desires in the exact way your ego planned them. And instead, you begin to respond to what's real, not what's rehearsed. Have you ever noticed how, when you finally stop obsessing about something, it suddenly shows up? That's not coincidence. That's physics. That's quantum alignment. When you release your grip, your frequency rises. When your frequency rises, your field opens. And when your field opens, manifestation becomes not just possible, it becomes inevitable. But the ego doesn't understand inevitability. It only understands urgency. It only understands effort. And so it fights to hold on, even as the soul whispers, let go. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care correctly. It means you stop worshiping the outcome and start honoring the experience. Because in quantum creation, the journey is not a means to the end, it is the end. The process is the portal. Every moment of alignment, every breath of presence, every act of trust is a manifestation in itself. The thing you desire is less important than the version of you it's calling forth. And that version cannot emerge unless you surrender the one clinging to control. The ego wants the outcome, but the soul wants the evolution. The ego says, when I get there, I'll feel peace. The soul says, find peace now, and you'll arrive where you're meant to be. The ego says, if I control everything, I won't be hurt. The soul says, if you trust everything, you'll be free. That's the shift. That's the gateway. That's the real manifestation, the transformation of the self. Because once you become the version of you that no longer needs the thing to feel whole, the thing arrives as a reflection of your wholeness. Ask yourself something brutally honest. Are you manifesting from wholeness or from a wound? Are you creating from desire or from deficiency? Are you seeking to express your abundance or to escape your lack? Because the field knows. It doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to why you want it. And if the why is rooted in fear, the manifestation will either delay or arrive distorted. That's not punishment. That's compassion. Because the universe is not interested in giving you what your ego craves, it's interested in giving you what your soul needs. And sometimes what your soul needs is to sit in the void, the space between the desire and the manifestation. The liminal zone where nothing makes sense and everything is being rearranged. This is the most sacred space in the spiritual journey and the most misunderstood. The ego hates the void. It calls it failure. It calls it stagnation. But the soul knows better. The soul knows the void is where timelines are rewritten, identities are shed, and new frequencies are born. This is where surrender becomes your superpower. Because in the void, you can't fake alignment. In the void, you can't pretend to trust, you either do or you don't. And the deeper the trust, the faster the shift. Because when you trust at that level, you become a match for the quantum field. You're no longer waiting, you're embodying. You're no longer projecting, you're receiving. And that's when the miracles begin, not just as outcomes, but as states of being. The ego fears surrender because it believes identity is tied to struggle. If you're not struggling, who are you? If you're not chasing, are you still worthy? If you don't have a plan, are you still safe? These are the questions that haunt the ego. But the soul doesn't ask those questions. The soul trusts its own gravity. It trusts that what belongs to it will find it not because it earned it, but because it is it. And that's the truth the ego cannot comprehend. So we must retrain the ego not to disappear, but to relax, and to soften, to become the servant rather than the master. You say to it, "Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for helping me survive. But now it's time to evolve. Now it's time to trust something deeper." The ego won't like it at first. It will resist. It will panic. But eventually it will begin to feel the peace that comes with surrender. And once it tastes that peace, it will begin to cooperate. This is where manifestation becomes effortless, not because life gets easy, but because you stop resisting the flow. You stop trying to control timing. You stop demanding outcomes. You start moving in rhythm with the field. You start listening instead of forcing. You start co-creating instead of conquering. And suddenly, what once felt impossible begins to unfold with divine precision. Not because you pushed harder, but because you aligned deeper. Let me ask you something that may shift your center. What are you still trying to control that is actually asking to be trusted? What outcome are you gripping so tightly that you're choking the life out of it? What part of you still believes that without control, everything will fall apart? And what if the truth is the opposite, that it's your control itself that's keeping you stuck in the loop? When you release control, you meet the quantum. And the quantum doesn't need time. It only needs truth. It only needs coherence between who you are and what you claim. The more you surrender, the more you embody. The more you embody, the more the field responds. Not in random ways, but in ways so precise, so poetic, so undeniable, that even the ego begins to bow. And so we return to the essence. Manifestation is not about calling something in. It's about calling something out from within you. It's about becoming the frequency of the thing you desire, until the universe has no choice but to mirror it back to you. And the only thing that blocks that process is the ego's need to control what was never meant to be controlled. The soul doesn't control. The soul co-creates. And in that co-creation, the impossible becomes inevitable. Part 3. The death of the old self and the birth of effortless manifestation. There is a moment in every spiritual journey that feels like ending and beginning all at once. A moment when the version of you who needed to struggle, to prove, to control, finally starts to dissolve. Not because you forced transformation, but because you stopped resisting it. You feel it in your bones, the soft collapse of an old identity. You stop trying to be the person who gets results through effort, and you start becoming the one who receives through alignment. It's not a moment of grand celebration. It's quiet, sacred, like a soul exhale after lifetimes of holding your breath. This is the death of the old self, the self that the ego built to survive. That version of you was necessary once. It helped you navigate a world built on fear, performance, and scarcity. But once you begin to tune into the quantum reality, you realize that survival is not your highest purpose. Creation is. Expression is. Expansion is. And those frequencies cannot flow through a vessel that still believes it must earn its right to exist. So the old self begins to fade, not because you killed it, but because you no longer feed it. And then something strange happens. The less you try, the more flows. The less you push, the more aligns. The less you chase, the more arrives. You begin to notice synchronicities that feel like divine choreography. People, ideas, opportunities, and resources show up without your logical planning. And they don't just show up, they resonate. They feel like a direct reflection of your inner state. This is the birth of effortless manifestation. It's not magic, it's physics. It's the natural byproduct of living in coherence with your true self. Have you ever asked yourself why things work out so easily for you when you're not trying so hard? Why the best ideas come in the shower, or on a walk, or in a moment of stillness? It's because you're finally out of the way. Your ego has gone quiet. Your nervous system has relaxed. Your energy has become available to the field. And the field doesn't need your hustle, it needs your harmony. That's the gateway to quantum manifestation. Not tension, not striving, but wholeness. When you operate from wholeness, you're no longer trying to fill a void, you're radiating from fullness. You're not praying for something to rescue you from lack. You're vibrating as someone who already has what they need. And in that space, manifestation becomes less about getting and more about matching. The question becomes, who am I being right now? Not what do I want? Because the field doesn't care what you want, it cares who you are. Who you are is the frequency, and frequency is what reality responds to. So many of us unconsciously try to manifest from fragmentation. We say we want love, but we're vibrating with self-abandonment. We say we want abundance, but our energy is soaked in scarcity. We say we want peace, but we're addicted to chaos. And the field listens not to our words, but to our essence. That's why the work is never about attracting something external. It's about becoming the internal match for the life you say you're ready for. And that requires honesty, deep, soul-level honesty. What wounds are still speaking louder than your vision? What old stories are still shaping your expectations? What unprocessed grief are you still carrying like a suitcase into every new timeline? Because no matter how much you visualize, script, or affirm, you cannot bypass the frequency of your truth. And your truth is not something you fix, it's something you feel. The ego avoids feeling because it fears what it cannot control. But the soul knows that feeling is the alchemy. Feeling is the bridge. Feeling is how you move energy from density to light. That's why the final step in quantum manifestation is not about doing anything, it's about allowing everything. Allowing the death of the old self, allowing the grief, allowing the uncertainty, allowing the unknown, and trusting that what is dying in you is making space for what is true in you. This is not passive. This is the most courageous act of all, because it means becoming empty enough to be filled, still enough to be guided, soft enough to be moved by something greater than logic. And when you arrive at that place of surrender, you realize something that changes everything. You were never blocked by the universe. You were only ever blocked by the part of you that didn't believe you deserved to receive without effort. The part of you that confused suffering with significance. The part of you that thought you had to be someone else to be worthy of what your soul desired. But now that part is quiet. It may still whisper, but it no longer leads. And in its place, something ancient rises: your true self. Your true self doesn't manifest through formulas. It doesn't chase, compete, or compare. It simply radiates. It becomes a beacon, a vibrational lighthouse that draws in what matches its light. And the manifestation becomes a mirror, not a prize. It shows you who you've become. It reflects your alignment, your healing, your wholeness. And when it arrives, you're not surprised. You're not shocked. You're ready. Because you were already living as the version of you who had it long before it showed up. Let me ask you now, not from ego to ego, but from soul to soul, are you ready to stop chasing and start collapsing time? Are you ready to stop performing and start receiving? Are you ready to let the old identity die so the effortless one can be born? If so, the shift will not come with fireworks. It will come with silence, with stillness, with the soft knowing that you are already it, that you've always been it, and you were simply remembering. The quantum field is not outside of you, it is you. Every time you align with truth, you send a signal to the field. Every time you choose peace over panic, you collapse an old timeline. Every time you embody love in a moment of fear, you rewrite your destiny. And that is the essence of quantum manifestation. It's not about bending reality to match your will. It's about bending yourself to match the frequency of your true nature. Once you do that, reality reshapes itself around you. So now, there is no more needing, no more begging, no more performing. There is only presence. There is only alignment. There is only you whole, worthy, and magnetic. And what you once thought of as miracles will become your new normal. Because they were never external. They were always echoes of your frequency. This is the end of the seeking. This is the beginning of the becoming.